once you've created any kind of template that you want people to work with, it's always good to test it. So I've tested it, and it's also good to get some opinions from a teammate or a team member on the functionality and get them to test it for you and see if they can break it. And one of the things that I've been asked is, for example, the work, it's not clear that this is hours, and can we just make sure it's clear that this is hours on the column heading. So what I'm going to do is go to Review, Ribbon, unprotect this sheet, and I'm going to change this to hours, like so. And again, I'm just going to right align these as well. So go to the Home ribbon and right align it, and right align the available hours as well, so it's just aligned to the data, like so. Happy with that. So that's that feedback, and then I'm going to reprotect that sheet. So now we've made those changes on the 2-week rota. The other piece of feedback that we got is on the Rota Data tab, and when people are interacting with this. And what they fundamentally stated is that people are overwriting the formulas. Even though we've identified them, people are going to make mistakes. And they've asked, is there any way that we can protect the formulas in these columns to stop people overwriting the formulas in the table when they're interacting with it? And the second piece of feedback is that when they're allocating the dates to the individual in the Team Rota, is that they need to have a calendar open on another screen, or a calendar next to them, or they're looking at their phone at the calendar to understand what days of the week the dates fall on before they allocate the dates. And then they asked, is there any way that we can have a date picker within the spreadsheet? Well, the answer is yes to both of those things. So even though you can't apply sheet protection on a sheet that's got a table in it, because the table won't function properly and you won't be able to add more data to that table, is that we can help the user by making the selection, so when they move to this column, get it to jump automatically to the next column. Don't allow them to type anything in here. So we can do that, but we're going to need Visual Basic. The second piece is that as far as the date picker, we can also create a date picker using a mini date picker add-in here. Now, another point I want to make as well is, once you've created the file and you've put your macros in, etc., is because it is a macro enabled file, when your users open this up, or indeed when you open it up again for the next time, for that first time that you open it up or your users open it up, it's going to give them a warning where it's going to say security warning and macros have been disabled. So what you want to do here is you want to click enable content here on this warning. When you open it up, enable content, you'll then get this warning, security warning. Just click yes on this, and then obviously it's on auto save. So if I close this down now and then I reopen this file, it no longer asks me that question because I've answered that question. So you just need to make that quite clear to your users, is that they need to enable the macros on this file. Obviously only do that on files that you're aware of the source and where they've come from, and it's a trusted source. And also I think with your organizations, just check policies around macros as well, but I think you will be okay as long as it's been created in-house. So there you go. Let's take care of the first part, and then we'll add the date picker functionality to this as well. So again, you can right click on any tab and view code, or you should have the developer ribbon available to you when you were doing the spin buttons, etc. And remember, if you don't see it, it's File, options, customize ribbon, and just make sure the developer ribbon is selected and ticked here, and click OK. So you can go to developer, and you can also hit this Visual Basic here, or Alt F11 is the shortcut. So here's a little bit of code that we put in before when we were resetting the value based on hitting that reset button and resetting the 2-week Rota view. So we're now going to double click on sheet 3 Rota data, and I've got the code window, so my cursor is flashing within the code window. I'm going to change this general to worksheet in the drop down, and it has automatically set up a private subroutine here, call here, which is based on this selection change. Now you can also look at these others, but we're going to focus on this selection change because that's exactly what we want. So each time we change the cell selection, we want to ask a number of questions of Excel. And what I'm going to do here to demonstrate this is I'm going to bring up the immediate window, which is really useful when you're trying to do Visual Basic and debug and ask questions of your code when you're doing it. So on the view here, I'm going to view and select the immediate window here and just have it here on the bottom here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to type something to demonstrate how this procedure is called each time you change your cell selection. So each time you change your cell selection, it'll return the actual cell value to this target here. So this target is an actual range. So the way that I can get it to appear in my immediate window is if I go type debug, then do full stop and print, and then I'm going to get it to put a some information in here. So the first piece of information that I'm going to put is in quotation marks, so I know what it's outputting. Is I want the cell value. Then I'm going to put a colon, a space, then close those quotation marks, and then using the ampersand or the and sign, and then space, and then I'm going to put target. Just help if you type it right. Target, a full stop, and then just do value. Select that value there. Then I'm going to do the ampersand again because I want some more information, which will make sense in a minute. I'm going to go again, open quotation marks, and I want the cell address. Again, space mark, and then do target, full stop, and then type address. So I want to return the address of the cell. Yep. And then let's do one more piece of information that I want. So again, so the ampersand, space, open quotation mark, and I'm going to put column number, and again colon, space, quotation mark, and again the ampersand, and then I'm going to type target dot column and select that and hit return. So each time I change the cell, it's going to call this up and it's going to print something, that information. It's going to say cell value, then etc., and it's going to print it to the immediate window. So if I go back to my Excel and I change my cell selection, if I then go back to my code window, you can see it's now typed the information here. So I've got cell value, oh, and you can see here I've got it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a space there, just so they're not crunched up like it is here, like so. I'm going to just put a little bit of just so we can read it better, but you can see the information has printed down here. And again, now I put those spaces in there, if I go back to my Excel and I change it, and I go back to my code window again. You see it's typed it again. Now I can read it better. So I've got the cell value, which is the nurse. I've then got the cell address here. I've got the and I've got the column number, which is column number 3. So that's 1, 2, 3. And again, if I do it again, I go back to my code window, you can see what it's outputting. Brilliant. Right. So hopefully that explains what that cell selection change procedure is doing and what that target variable here, which is a variable, what that's doing. So let's look at how we can use that to get it to recognize that a column has a formula and therefore it needs to jump to the next column. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to write some code, and I'll try and explain the code as I write it. As I said before, it's always good to comment your code, and I gotta admit I'm a little bit bad at this, so I would say it helps a lot if you put comments in your code so you know what it's doing, instead of trying to work out again what it's doing each time you revisit your VB. So this first piece of code, so let me get rid of this here because I don't need it anymore. So the first thing I need to know is I need to check whether this cell is either cell C, E, G, I, K, L and M. I need to check it. Now, which means then, if you remember that column C, yeah, is column 3. You got, so that's 1, 2, so it's 3, 4, 5, 7, 9, 11, 12 and 13. These are the columns that we need to be checking. Yeah. Now, so if I go back to my code window, and I'm just going to type some information here. So I'm going to go check. So again, the apostrophe, which denotes that this line is an actual comment and it's not code to Visual Basic. So I'm going to put check. So let me just type out the comment here. And if I hit return on that, it should just go green. It recognizes it as a comment. So great. So now I'm just going to put a return there as well. So I've got a space. So now I've got my code. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use an if then statement. So if then, so if this question is true, then do something, or if it's not true, then do something else. So this is an if then statement that's commonly used within Visual Basic. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to go if, so type the target, so target, which is this variable here, do full stop, and then I'm going to put column, yeah, equals 3. But I'm also then going to get it to ask and check if the column equals, so that's column 3 is C, then column E is 5. I'll tell you what, before I type this, let's just make this easy so we can see. So that, I put that as 3, so I just know that that's 3. I know that E is 5. So let me just put the column numbers in here. Well, there you go. So now I put the column numbers there as well, just for reference, so we know what they are. So, you know, C being 3, E being column 5, and again, if I go back to Excel, C being 3, 1, 2, 3, E being 5, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. If I then go back to my Visual Basic window here, we're going to use the if then statement. So here we go. So if target dot column, so if it equals 3, we want to do this check, or if target equals column equals 5, or target column. So let me just type this out and then I'll walk through what I've just done with this if statement. So there you go, I've finished typing that out. So if the target column equals 3, or if it equals 5, or if it equals 7, if it equals 9, I've then done a space here and then an underscore just to helps me put the code, a single line of code, over 2 lines because it would have been too long across here. So I've just put a space, underscore, and then continued with the code. Or if target equals 11, 12, and 13, if it equals any of those, then do something. So if I hit return, and then what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to do a tab just to indent this code. So again, it helps me follow it a little bit easier. So I'm going to do a tab and move it to the right. And then I'm going to put another bit of code in here. So the thing that I want to test is, does it have a formula? So does the cell have a formula? Yeah, that's the question that I'm asking. And again, I'm just going to put it onto a different line here just so we can see. Yeah, and the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to do another if statement within this if statement. So here, this if statement here is, I'm just going to put end if just to finish that one and do return. So that belongs to this here. Then here, I'm going to type another if statement if the target has formula equals false, then we're going to do nothing. We're going to do nothing here. So again, I put do nothing. However, if it does have a formula, I'm going to do else in tab. So if the cell has nothing, so do nothing if cell does not have a formula, and let user change cell value. Accordingly. Right. So there you go. So that's what's happening if the cell doesn't have a formula. If the cell has a formula, then jump to the right. Yeah, what we want is that if there's a formula in there, we want the user to be moved to the right so they can't interact with that cell, i.e. overwrite the formula. Yeah, and the way that we're going to do that is with this little piece of code. So I'm going to type active sheet, i.e. this sheet 3 dot cells, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the target row and the target cell as a reference, but just change the target column to be +1, and that'll move it to the right. Yeah, so in here, so if they select this, they'll take this cell, so it'll be row. So if they selected this one here, it'd be cell row 5, and it'll be column 3. So yeah, and I want to change that column 3 to column 4, make it jump. That's what I'm going to do. So here, open bracket, is the first part of the argument is that I want the row. So the target row is going to be the same. We're going to set the cell address to be exactly the same, and I'm going to do comma. As far as the target column though, as in the active cell, is going to be the current target row. That's going to be the same here. But then as far as the column is concerned, I'm going to make it equal the target column value here plus 1, and then say select it and hit return. It does help if you put the close bracket here as well. There you go, and there you go. Hit now and hit return. And again, just make sure you type this stuff in correctly. There you go. So now it's got the uppercase active sheet, so I can see that's correct. So I'm saying if it does have a formula, then the active sheet cell is select the same row, but then select the column to the right plus 1. If I put -1, then it would move it to the left. Yeah, if I put -1 here, okay. And then all I'm simply going to do is then type, so it's aligned here as well with the if else, as I'm going to type end if. That then closes out that if then statement, like so. And then all I'm going to do is select that, just delete that, and delete that. So that little bit of code there should move us off the row. And the way that I can check this is, what I'm going to do is I'm going to force the code to stop each time so we can step through it and see what's going on. So I'm going to the left here on this grey area here, I'm going to left click, which then puts this stop sign for this piece of line. So each time it gets to this, it will stop and wait for us to step through the code. So if I go back to Excel now, so we know this column 3 here, we want it to jump to this column. So if I click that column, you see it stopped. Now what I can do is I can, in the immediate window, I can ask a question. So if I go question mark target dot column and hit return, so it's telling me it's on column 3. Yeah, so I can see that. So by definition it'll then ask the question. So if I hit F8, the function 8 key, to step through the code, so now I'm asking the target dot has formula. Yeah, so again, the target has a formula, and again I should be able to type question mark here, hit return, and it says true. So we know the target has a formula, so it should jump to this piece of code here. So again, F8, so press the function 8 key. So it's not false, so it's moving to the else question. Now it's saying, right, the target dot cell needs to select the cell to the right here. So same row, but plus 1 to the column. So if I do F8 here, now obviously because it's changed selection, it's going to rerun the code, so it's going to loop within itself. So again, stop, and if I then in the question in here, because it doesn't equal column 3, yeah, because if I go question mark, so the question mark is I'm asking a question within the immediate window. I'm going target dot column, hit return, and there you go, it's done it. So it's moved it, so the target column now is now 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this off here, and then I'm just going to hit this play here, just tell it to run through the code as normal and play. So if I go to my Excel window, we've now got the date column. So again, if I select this column, it just jumps. If I tab, it'll jump. If I tab to these, it just jumps to the end of the row. Brilliant. So that now works. So we've now created some simple code that steps through and it moves the column. So again, each time it's going through, you change that cell selection, it will ask the question, is it one of these columns? If so, it'll ask the question, does it have a formula? If it's false, then do nothing and let the user do what they normally do. If it does have a formula, then jump out of that cell. Don't let them interact with that cell. So I can now interact with this fine. I can change this and change these and it's fine. Yeah, it works fine. But as soon as I click in any of these, anywhere on here, it just jumps accordingly and stops me from interacting with that cell. So that's the first problem answered. Brilliant. Now the date picker and adding that date picker functionality is definitely much more complicated. So the first thing we've got to do is we've got to add a date picker, and we've got to add something for the user to interact with to call up that date picker, and then make sure it becomes visible when we're in the date column and it's not visible when we reselect a different cell or select a cell that is not a date. So let's do that next. We're going to use what's available to us in Office 365, which is the mini calendar add-in, and we're going to utilize that with some additional code to make this work within our table in this scenario. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at our add-ins. I'm just going to move this over to the right. I'm going to put an add-in in here. So on the home tab, you may see this option here called add-ins, or if you don't see it here, it should be available on your developer tab. And the two ways that you can access it, so again on home, if I select add-ins, and I can do get, you can see it's already here for me, the mini calendar, because I've already used it within a file, within my files. But if you can't see it here, then basically you just go get add-ins and you do a search and type mini calendar, and if I hit return, and here it is, and you just click add and it will add it to your spreadsheet. And the other way is via the developer ribbon, and again if I click this add in, it'll bring up the same window, and again if I do store and do a search mini calendar and search, and again click add. But because it's already within my I've already selected it once, I can simply just select it here from my add-ins and click add here. So there is my date picker. Fantastic. And the way this works is whatever cell you've got selected, if you click it, it will then enter a date like so. And if there's already a date in there, if I decide to change it through the date picker, it'll just ask me if I want to overwrite it, and I just click OK, and I can move like so through the months. So that's a fantastic bit of functionality, and I can change the way this looks. So I can change the size of it, I can change the style. So if I change it to, let's make it green, I can change the calendar system. So I want this to be Monday to Sunday. So if I click that there, it will change it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I can also include weeks of the year, so if I want to know what what week of the week number of the year it is, and I can also select a range, and also you can add the time to this as well, which I'm not going to do here. So I'm going to hit the X button to close these down, and so there we go. So I've got my date picker there. I'm just going to delete this date. So with my date picker selected, my mini date picker selected, I'm going to change the name of this, and the name that I'm going to call this is, I'm going to call it my Rota calendar because that's the name I want to be able to refer to when I want to call it and open it on my spreadsheet. So with the add-in and the mini date picker selected, I'm going to go home on my home ribbon, find and select, do the drop down, and I'm going to selection pane here, which then brings up the selection pane. So at the moment this add-in is called add-in 2. So I'm going to change the name to Rota Calendar and hit return. So that's what this is now called. And then I'm going to close that pane down like so. So now that we've got our date picker, we need something to appear that we can click to call it up when we want to use it within the date. So what I want to happen is when I click in the date field, a little icon appears here that tells me I can click on it and open up a date picker. So let's create that little icon. Yeah. So I'm going to first of all, let's draw something here. So I'm going to insert shape. Let's take that shape up now. Let's insert some rounded edges like so. So let's create a little shape, and then shape effect to a preset. Let's use this one here. I like that. Okay, let's make it a little bit lighter. Again, shape effect like so. Okay, I like that. Let's make it a little bit sort of wider. Now let's get an icon in there. So I'm going to do insert. So I'm going to choose icon, type in calendar. There we go. I'm going to go with this one. I like that one. Click insert. So there's my calendar. So let's change the so now we've got that. Let's choose a colour. Let's go with that. I think let's make this then smaller. Bit there. And let's change the make it a little bit smaller. And choosing the arrow keys just to move it. And then if I select that and that together and do Control copy and then paste as a picture. Yeah, I like that. I can get rid of those now. If I just take this over here, so when it appears, I can see it. Let's make that a little bit smaller. There you go. I can see a little icon appears there. Right, great. So I like that. So if I now, again with that selected, go to on the home ribbon, find and select selection ribbon, and I'm going to call this to the picture 13. I'm going to give it a name so I can call it and I know what it is. And I'm going to call this call icon 2, like so. So call icon 2 and hit return. Right, and close that down. So I've now got my call option and I've got my add-in. So now that I've created my two items here, which are two pictures or icons. So I've got my add-in here, which is the date picker, and I've got this little icon that I'm going to use, and I want that to appear each time against the date cell, so the user can then click that to make this appear and then amend the date. But what I don't want to happen is I don't want it to appear if we click in a column that is not a date column, or we click on a row where it's not part of the table. I want it to recognize that. So the first thing I'm going to do is create the procedure when you click on this icon first. So when you click on this icon, what does it call up? It calls up this date picker, and I want also these to be aligned with the cell and the row in question, the active cell or row. I don't want it to appear over here. I want it to appear next to the date column, like so. Right. What I'm going to do is select again on the developer ribbon, Visual Basic window. So here's the code that we've done. Here's my immediate window. So what we're going to do, we are going to change this in a little while, but the first thing is I want to do that call up procedure. So I'm going to type sub. So outside of this procedure here, so after the end sub of this procedure, I'm going to type sub show calendar and hit return. And as you see, it's drawn this line here. We've got our procedure. So again, I'm going to put some comments. So I'm going to do my apostrophe here, and the purpose of this is to display our date picker calendar for the user. Yeah, so that's my comment. This is what this is doing. So again, on the active sheet, so it's on the active sheet, which is the sheet 3 here. Active sheet. Now the mini date picker add-in is referred to as a shape, so Excel recognizes it as a shape. So I'm going to go full stop shapes, and if you remember, so we're going to call this and we want to make it visible. So at any point in time, we don't delete it from the spreadsheet. All we're doing is either making it visible or making it invisible, and we're just moving it around the spreadsheet in line with the active cell, yeah, if appropriate. So what I'm going to type here is shapes, so active sheet shapes, open bracket, and remember we gave it a name, and that name was Rota calendar, and then close quotation mark and the name, and then close bracket, and all we're saying is dot full stop visible property equals true. That's all we're doing here. So as soon as we call it up and we click this little small icon, is we want that to bring up the calendar. Now we need to position it accordingly. So now the next bit is we need to position the calendar next to the active cell. So we need to position, so again apostrophe calendar to the active cell. Yeah, and how I'm going to do that is I'm going to, again, we need to take a few reference points. We need the left hand side of the calendar to be aligned to the left of the active cell, but then we want to move it to the right and just outside of the active cell. So we're going to use the width of that cell to understand from the left how far we need to move the calendar icon, and then we just need to make sure that people can interact with that cell appropriately, or if it's a drop down, be able to do the drop downs and things like that. So we're just going to move it slightly more to the right, and the way that we're going to do that, so just to be clear, if I select this date, we're going to have an icon appear. This icon's going to appear to here. They click on it. We want that icon to appear to the right of this cell, slightly more to the right, so it's not on top of the cell. We want to move it to the right so the user can see what's going on within the cell, yeah, if that makes sense. And the way that I'm going to do that is go active sheet again, full stop, give me an error saying, well, you haven't completed what you started. But you can just click OK and ignore that. So what I want to take is I want to take this bit here because I'm going to use this line repeat. So I'm going to do Control copy, and all I'm going to do is just highlight that and Control V and then start. So the first property, oh, not inside the bracket there, so outside that bracket, full stop, I'm going to take the left property, and I want the left property to be equal to active cell left, that its left property, but then I want to add the width of that cell to move it to the right, plus active cell width, yeah, and then I'm going to put plus 8 points, like so. So when it's called up, I'm going to the left, but now at the moment that'll move it to the right of the column, but I also want it to be aligned to the row as well. So I want it to know that we are clicking anywhere within the Excel file, because at the moment that will just make it appear to the right of this column or to the right of this column, but it won't be aligned with the row. So now let's take care of the row reference. So again, I'm going to do Control Paste, because it's the same thing, but now I want the top value, so type top property to equal the active cell top property. And again, I'm just going to take the active cell height plus 8, just to move it just slightly again, so it's not obscuring the cell. So active cell top, I'm going to take, and the active cell height. Again, I'm just trying to make sure that it's not obscuring the actual cell, it's appearing near where the active cell is, right? So that's what I'm putting there, like so. Now that we've made it appear and we've aligned it next to the active cell appropriately, is with the actual icon that we clicked on to call up this, we don't want that obscuring it, we want to make that hide and disappear. So the way that I'm going to do that is I am going to go again, and I want to hide the calendar icon to open this mini calendar, yeah, or make the mini calendar visible, because we don't need it anymore, do we? So again, just putting this commentary, just keep putting the commentary. It's always good to put comments against your code so you know what it is. So here I'm just going to now type, and again I'm going to paste, but I'm just going to replace this, because if you remember, we gave our icon, the name of our icon that we renamed it to was cal icon. And all I'm going to do is go visible property of that equals false, and there we go. So that's the first bit of code. Wonderful. We've now got to change this to recognize that it's a date column, and also that it's outside of the table. So next we'll look at this piece of code here and change it to pull it all together. So the next part of the challenge is that we need to take this simplistic code here and we need to make it a little bit more complex. So the first question I want to ask here, so if I go back to my Excel file here, is that I don't want this calling up anything to do with the date picker if we're clicking outside of here, yeah? So I don't want it to do anything with the date picker if we're calling outside here. However, if we're inside here, then I want it to be asking the question, is this a date? So again, so the columns that we're now interested in are going to be columns, so 1, 2, 3, so column 4 and column 6, so 4 and 6. So again, the first bit is I need to understand, is it within the table or is it not? And the way that I'm going to do that in my way is if I go back to the Visual Basic, is I'm going to create another variable where I'm going to assign a row count to this. And basically the row count is going to be the number of rows within the table plus the header will then give me the row count of 39 as it stands at this point in time. And if the row count of the target cell is higher than 39, then don't do anything. That's fundamentally what I'm aiming for here. So if I go back to my code window, so let's assign that variable. So again, I'm going to put another comment. So I'm going to go so apostrophe declare a variable for my table row count. Yeah, so I know where the table ends. So I'm just putting it in plain English here for myself and hit return. So the way that you declare a variable, and we won't get into the different types of variables here, we're going to keep it simple for the purposes of this video. We are going to create a single variable, which is an integer, which is a numeric data type that can hold whole numbers without decimal positions. So let's declare our variable. So I'm going to go dim, which is the way that I start the declaration of a variable statement. And then I'm going to call my variable my row count, like so. I want that to be an uppercase R. And then space as. And then I'm going to start typing in integer, or like so. And there's my variable. Boom. So that is how I am going to get, that's my variable, and then I'm going to set the value. So let's set the value to my table row count plus the header. The header. And it'll become why I'm adding the header. So the header is occupies, obviously, so the header occupies one row here. So when I'm getting the value of the row count of the table, it will count the rows, how many rows of information are in the table. It doesn't count the header in that count, okay? Just to be clear. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to use the list objects function. So again, I'm going to refer to my row count. My row count equals, so me as in what's active at this moment in time, active. So I'm going to go list objects like so, and then open bracket. And if you remember, we called our table, our rota table, rota data, and close those quotation marks, close bracket, and then I want to get the value, the row count. So list rows dot count. So that list object row count. Then I want to add the header. So I then go +1, like so. Now, let's do something here because we want to make sure that we are getting this information right. So let's just test this. So I'm going to just add on the end after this, I'm just going to type Debug.Print. Yeah. And I'm going to put in quotation marks, I'm going to put table row count, and then type my row count dot value. But I don't even have to just put that like so. If I just put an and there as well, ampersand. So I'm just telling it to print that. So if I go onto the sheet now, and if I click anywhere, so when I do that selection change again, remember, and I then go back to my code, you can see it's now counted table row count. It's counted it 39. So that works. So we can see that works. So we can see, yeah, it goes down to row 39. Brilliant. Yeah, and it doesn't matter, it'll just keep, no matter where I'm clicking here, yeah, it'll just keep returning that row value. What we want to use that is we want to use it as a test. Now, so if I just delete that for a second. So we know that works, and I'm literally, now you can either just select this and delete it, or you can comment it out. So if I put an apostrophe before it, I then comment that piece of code out and it's gone. But just for cleanliness, I'm just going to get rid of that and delete it. Now, the next thing that we want to do is when we're running this, is we want to make sure, so if I scroll up, is these have got to be hidden. So the starting position, always when I'm doing the selection, is that these two are invisible. So I don't want the calendar visible, and I don't want this icon visible. Now, before I make this and run the code, because as soon as I start doing this, it will actually activate that code. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on this icon, and I'm going to assign, so this little piece of Visual Basic here that we've written for it, I'm going to assign it to that. So I'm going to right click, and I'm going to assign the macro like so. And here it is, sheet 3. So on this sheet, show calendar. So I'm going to select that and just make it know it's within this workbook. Select that and click OK. So I've now assigned that macro like so to that. I'm then going to go to my Visual Basic window, and I'm going to add those two pieces of code. So I'm going to hide as my starting position. I'm going to hide my calendar, my mini calendar, and my calendar icon. Yeah. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to take this piece of code from here and just copy it, and I'm going to paste it here, but I'm going to change the property to be false. So visible property equals false, and hit return. And then I'm going to take this one here also, and just copy that where we've made it false there also, and I'm going to hit return and do Control V. So now when we run this code, these will now disappear from view. So we haven't deleted them, it's just made their visible property false. So as soon as I select here, they're gone now, because it's run this bit of code when we change the selection. Great. All running smoothly so far. Hopefully you'll keep it up. So the next thing we've got to do is we've got to add some questions in here as far as if it's the date column, what do we do? So in here, has formula, etc. Doesn't have a formula, then it's false. So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to go into this piece here where it says do nothing. We're now going to do nothing. I do nothing, but we're going to now check if it is a date column. Yeah, and the way that I'm going to do that is we're going to do another if statement. So we know that this is column, so if we look at the column count at the moment, so I've got 1 2 3 4 5 6, so it's column 4 and 6 that we're checking here. We need to make sure that we're checking that it's those columns. So what we're going to do, again, go back to my code, and in this statement here is I'm going to type if, and again I'm doing it indented so we make sure that we're keeping it neat as far as these if statements are concerned. So if active cell dot column equals 4, or active cell dot column equals 6, remember, then we want to do something. Then we're going to do something, yeah, hit return. But then I also want to check, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to type an end if here as well, just so I'm trying to keep it nice and clean here. So we've got the end if, then I'm going to tab again, so I'm going to indent within that if then statement here, because then what I want to do, because I don't need to do an else, because fundamentally if it's not column 4 and it's not column 6, then we're not interested as far as the date pick is concerned. But now I want to make sure is that if this row count is less than or equal to, so if the active cell row is less than or equal to the row count here, then we do the date, then we do this check. Yeah, so I'm going to go if, so this if statement is if active cell dot row value is less than or equal to my row count, then we do this code. Yeah, it does help if you type then properly. Then we do this code, and again I'm going to indent within this if statement. So what I'm going to do here is I want to display, so if it is less than the so equals column 4, it's a date column, it's within the table, then let's display the call icon. So what I'm going to do here is going to go display calendar icon to open the mini calendar date picker. Hit hit return. So I'm going to go active sheet. So to make this simple is I'm going to take this piece here, I'm going to copy it, so it's the icon bit that I'm looking at, so I'm going to control copy and do control V and change that false to be true. I'm then going to position it, so again the same thing, I'm going to go active, so I can just do a paste here. So again, I just want this part here, and then I'm going to change the properties. So I'm going to do control copy, control V. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set its top property alignment is going to be equal to the active cell top property, like so. Yeah, and hit return. I'm then going to control paste again, and I'm going to take the left property is going to be equal to the active cell dot left property. Remember, we want to move it to the right, so plus the active cell width, and then just plus 8, just to add a little bit more to the right. So now we've made the icon visible, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move, so I'm going to position it first. So let's position the icon. Yeah. And then make it visible, like so. Now, what if it's not a calendar? Or what if it's outside of that that row count? Is again just to line it up with the if. So I'm going to type else and then return, and then tab. I'm going to say hide it. If hide calendar, if it's outside, if the cell is outside of the table. And I'm just going to make sure, because it might, if you think about it, the user might have gone to a date cell, might have opened up the calendar and then clicked outside the table. So we want to make sure that the call icon and the mini date picker are both hidden. And again, all I do is take these two values here that I've set at the beginning of it and do control copy, and I'm going to click here and do control paste. And again, I'm just going to hit the tab button, click before it and hit tab just to align. I'm happy with that. And then I'm just going to close this if statement off with an end if, like so. So again, I'm just going to tidy this up a little bit here. So what we're doing here is if it's inside the table and it's a date column, then show it. If not, so on. So let's test if that works. So if I click here, that's fine. If I click here, that's fine. If I click down here, that's fine. But the minute I click a date, it should show the icon, and it hasn't. Why is that? So let's check what it's doing. All right. So, and the reason why it hasn't done anything is if we go to here and let's step through the code. Yeah, let's step through the code and see what's going. So if I click here and I press the F8 key, The first thing it's asking is, within this if statement, it's asking the original question that we started off with was, does it equal any of these column 3, 5, etc. It's asking that question, is it a date column? And the reason why we've put this in here is that it's going to jump. So if I do F8, it's now actually getting to this piece of code. It's actually jumping to this end if here, like so. Yeah. And again, if I go onto here and if I jump to this one here and jump, again, if I follow the code through, it's not actually asking the question, and it's moving to the right. Okay, it loops through, it doesn't actually do anything. Yeah, it doesn't get to this piece of code. And again, if I just press play, let it play it all the way through. Right, so what we've got to do, so we know that actually if it jumps a row, we then want to, by definition, if it jumps a row from here to this date or from here to this date, we want it to ask those questions. We want it to go through this routine, don't we? So again, if I take this code, just take it, yeah, right, and I do a control copy, is that we know if it gets to here, we want it to ask that question. So I'm going to then paste that there like so, and again, just make it sure. So if the cell is active, I then want it to do this code. So let's just check that that's doing that. So if I select this, it jumps. If I do F8 now, it's then moving it. It then's looping in, and then it's going to ask that question, is it 4? Yes it is. Is it inside the row? Yes it is. So therefore it's now doing it. Perfect. Just play that through. So let's just take that off and go to here. So we can now see there's that icon, and if I click on it, it brings up the date picker. Brilliant. And if I click off it, again, just play it through, back to here, everything's disappeared. So that's great. Wonderful. So what happens if I click on a cell and I press play and run it through? Still doesn't come up. So why it's doing that? So let's click it again. So now if I press F8, it's not within those columns, so it's now jumping to this here. Right, so what I need to do then is I need to put an else statement. So if this is not true, we still need to check for the date. So again, if I press play, that's fine. So now here, if I type else, and then I'm going to paste that code in. So if I control V, so this is the original code that we copied. So I want it to do this check. I'm just going to highlight it like so, and I'm going to hold down the shift key and the tab key just to move it in slightly. So I want it to be out slightly there, indented. Right. So now if we tick it, and again F8 to step through the code, so press F8 again, it's going to ask the question, and it jumps to this else statement now, and now it's going to check this piece of code and run it. And if I just let it run, and there you go, we've got the icon. So if I go back to my Visual Basic Editor, I take that stop icon, so click it, left click it to take it off. So now when I run this, this is appearing. If that appears, wonderful. If I click outside the table, it disappears. If I click on a non-date column, it appears, and there you go, and it appears. Let's test it if I get a new row. So if I click on this, it'll jump, get my new row. If I just do Mary Green, let's take this date picker, let's scroll down, let's go, let's do it from the new year, so let's move over to that. Let's do Tuesday, that's great. And then if I select this, disappears, I can bring that back up. If I change that to let's do it to the Saturday, that's fine. It then disappears here. Let's do it vacation, so take this to vacation, like so. Mary on holiday, wash. I can click here, but I click here, it's bringing up the date, that's great. Here, I can right click on that and delete that row. If I go to the 2-week rota and I just scroll through, brilliant, yeah, and I'm scrolling through, keep going, and there you go, you can see Mary's holiday has been captured. I can reset back to my start date, so that works perfectly. And there you go. Go back to my Visual Basic window. Again, you can check the code by running the compile VBA. It all seems to work. And there we have it. We've now written some code together. I hope that was helpful and was easy to follow. And that brings us to the end of this Team Rota template. So this is how I would do it. How would you do it in Office 365? Thank you for watching. I hope you've learnt something and you have a wonderful, wonderful day wherever you are. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye bye now.